Have you ever had a really difficult conversation? How did you approach that conversation? How did you handle that conversation? Question we're tackling today is how to have difficult conversations. Those ones that you probably don't really want to have, but are often necessary. So thanks so much for joining us on the Value Added Podcast. And we hope the information we give you today will be helpful for you as it has been for us.
Indeed. I think you have a good quote there for us as well, Jared.
I do. Peter Bromberg, he said, when we avoid difficult conversations, we trade short-term dysfunction, or no, short-term discomfort for long-term dysfunction.
Yeah.
Right. So when we avoid difficult conversations, we trade short-term discomfort. Oh, I don't like this for a long-term dysfunction.
Yeah, we end
Is
up
it worth it?
we end up letting something go longer than it should just because we don't want to face that short-term uncomfortableness of having the conversation.
And we don't want to minimize the discomfort. We're going to talk about that
Right.
today because difficult conversations, they're not comfortable. And we will readily admit that. But I definitely agree with Peter when he said, if you avoid these difficult conversations, wow, it's going to make the short term discomfort look like a walk in the park when you're hitting that
Yeah.
dysfunction long term.
Well, yeah, hence the name difficult conversations. Right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, Bill, give us a reminder, give us a recap of where we were last couple episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. Last couple episodes, we talked about communication and how that's the number one vehicle in which we influence others. And we thought this would be a great topic to follow up on that is how do you have those difficult conversations? Is there a way to approach it that would make it effective and beneficial? Maybe a little less discomfortable, not less hard. So, one thing to keep in mind is the longer we wait to have that difficult conversation, the harder that conversation becomes. It's kind of like I'm putting off my fitness, and the more years go by that I put off my fitness, the more I go downhill, which I can, I guess, attest to a little bit. So I'm getting back into the gym myself for that very reason. But one thing to keep in mind in a difficult conversation, or let's say a tough conversation, doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be an oppositional conversation, right? So that all goes back to what we've been talking about and dropping in several episodes now about connecting before correcting,
right.
care and candor. Leaders need to have both in healthy amounts. So in all possible, you want to keep short accounts to begin with. I just have this operational approach, and Jared's familiar with this. We do this in our church leadership that we're part of, is if there is even a whisper of something that someone has something against me or has a concern or a question about something, a program or process, I don't wait. I go right to that person and find out, I heard about this was going on. I'd like to help. Can you tell me about that a little bit? We just keep it short. We don't wait. We don't let it fester because again, the longer we wait to have that difficult conversation, the harder it becomes to have that difficult conversation.
It gives dysfunction a whole nother. I mean, you look at things like resentment,
Right.
right? Can grow inside of who you are as a person, right? When you're waiting to have a difficult conversation. I don't know if you've ever done this, Bill, but I do this all the time. Even if I'm saying, okay, I'm going to let somebody sleep on this, I'm going to sleep on this and come into this in the morning. Sometimes I still lose sleep because I'm playing this conversation in my head,
Oh, yeah.
and it next to never goes the way that I played it in my head. And
Yeah.
so that sometimes is even think about elongating that process. You waited a week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 6 months, a year, right? And you get all this time for resentment to grow, and that can really fester and grow.
Ken, I was a young man and I was a manager in a manufacturing plant warehouse. Um, and one of the employees just started giving me the cold shoulder all the time whenever we pass each other or interacted with each other. And I'm like, what's going on? And I was a little, I was sensitive and a little concerned and afraid about approaching and finding out what's going on. And I waited and I waited and I waited. And I finally got to the point, hey, this is impacting productivity. This is impacting our ability to relate and get things done on the floor, on the manufacturing plant. So I got to address this. So I went up to her and I asked, I said, it turns out it was over the smallest thing, and that it was just a miscommunication, but it took too long. I waited too long to have that. It could have been cleared up so much sooner. Productivity could have improved a lot better. Output for the business could have increased. We could have been maybe a little bit more profitable as a result, all because I waited on having a difficult conversation.
So it turned into something that it never was.
Exactly. It just inflated. And as time went by, it's like wine, it ferments and it gets bigger and bigger. And I'm sure she does, as I do, have those conversations, as you said, in your mind over and over and over, and it just inflates it and the emotions grow with it until it just really needs to be, so not only at church, I've practiced keeping short accounts in my place of work as well. And, the response has been tremendous when I tell them, I say, hey, look, I heard something was going on. I like to keep short accounts. I want to talk this out. What's going on? And they're so happy, impressed, respectful that I wanted to clear the air and move forward with a good relationship within the workplace. So
another leadership and parenting parallel, you guys know I'm famous for those by now, the first few episodes. This is raising kids 101. When they come to you with a word about somebody else, and a lot of times we know, okay, this could turn into a deposit onto the gossip train if you don't address it with your child to go address it with the person. I do this with team building as well. I get a team member who comes to me and says, so-and-so didn't do X, Y, and Z, or so-and-so said X, Y, and Z. And I find myself with my kids and sometimes with my team, just communicate with each other. Keep those counts short, because again, the longer you let these things fester, things like resentment, but also things like gossip happen.
Yeah.
Well, what's bothering you today? Well, this happened. And then you find yourself talking about this to somebody that has no business hearing it.
Right.
Because you didn't keep a short count. And then you can actually sow seeds of dysfunction into your own organization by simply not going to the source of the problem or that conversation as soon as possible.
Yeah, it can really become wildfire if you don't go to that person, and that person goes to someone else, and you talk to someone else, and then they talk to someone else, and they have you heard about these two. And so keeping short accounts is really just healthy emotionally for the individuals and also for the organization that you're leading in. So one other thing to keep in mind, though, is tough conversations create an opportunity for growth, right? For ourselves as leaders, we're going to learn from those conversations and learn to do them better. And maybe there's something in there that we need to hear that we didn't realize, have our eyes opened a little bit, but also for being servant leaders, wanting the best and add value and help people to rise up to their greatest potential. Those conversations really move the ball forward down the field to that very end. So having tough conversations create opportunity for growth, and going in with that mindset kind of changes the game a bit. It really kind of changes your perspective and gives you a little more courage. And we'll talk about courage in a moment to do that. So,
yeah. You also have on here, kind of in our notes, this is a really good point, I think. The ignoring difficult conversations doesn't add value to people.
It doesn't,
which is what leadership.
It's just the opposite of what we intended as leaders, right? Yeah, we're shortchanging them by not having that conversation. So
yeah, absolutely. So one of the things we wanted to talk about today was identifying the context of the conversation. Right? We talked a little bit about this in a previous episode, how important it is to identify the context before you go into the conversation. It's a great leadership tip Bill and I have used over the years that kind of prepares our minds, hearts, whatever you want to say, to have these conversations. Again, because the goal is to add value and influence people positively. So one of the, just to give an example of what I mean, what Bill and I are talking about when we say identify the context, is this conversation going to be one of conflict resolution? Whether it's you with a person you're in conflict with on the team, whether it's two team members that you're addressing, is that the context? right?
Yeah.
Could it be addressing behavior or performance?
They're
When you're
underperforming. Yeah.
hey, somebody's underperforming. I need to address this as a leader. Behaviors, late for work, early to leave, whatever it might be. What are those things? Could it be letting someone go? I mean, that's a tough conversation to have. And even when you're letting somebody go, is the goal to add value to them or just to get them out of the organization? Right. So
Right.
it's again, leadership is about people, developing other people, growing other people. So that's a good thing to think through.
Yeah. Sometimes I'll go into a conversation with someone who I know may not be as motivated or really see their career path being long term with the current organization. And I'll tell them, I said, look, my goal is to make you the best you can be. My goal is to put tools in your toolbox. So no matter where you are and where you go, you have it as a resource to pull out and use at whatever organization you're at.
Mhm.
I always communicate, this isn't just for me. I'm not, my only um, goal is not selfish in my own organization that I'm the leader in. It really is adding value so they carry it with them wherever they go.
Yeah.
So
I think that's huge because one of the ways we can do this and just think through this, what this would look like for you in your certain situation. I want those who I'm leading to be able to do what I'm doing. So if you have a staff underneath of you, identifying those leaders within that group who could potentially do the exact same job that you're doing.
Yeah.
That's a good way to look at. That's how much value you want to add to another person.
yeah, a healthy leader, emotionally intelligent leader sets the goal is to work themselves out of a position, job, or role
Yeah.
by raising others up to take its place.
Yeah.
It's what leaders do.
Yeah, I think it was my dad who used to say, "Leaders beget leaders."
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
was kind of cool. So, and then the other context that perhaps could be in that will be a difficult conversation is challenging values, procedures, or even superiors. Did you have to have a conversation about, hey, I'm not agreeing with these core values of our organization. I don't like the way we're doing these certain things. Our procedures are crap, whatever it might be.
Yeah.
How do you have that conversation? Especially when you're talking to somebody who's your superior.
And keep in mind, some of these conversations are going to be for people that you are leading, that you are developing and growing. But maybe sometimes there's a leader above you need to go have this difficult conversation with, saying, hey, I see you going in this direction that really doesn't line up with the core values of our organization. Could you explain to me your goal a little bit so I can better understand?
Yeah.
So it's not just down, it's,
It's up to.
and sometimes it's vertical. You got a peer that you maybe need to talk to as well.
Right. They're coming to you. Hey, I want to have a conversation with so and so. Okay, well, let's think through our attitudes and the reason why. And yeah, there's so much to unpack with difficult conversations. But again, make sure you identify the context because that's really important.
It's huge.
And then Bill, you've got a kind of a list of approaches for us too.
I do. So bear with me. There's a number of things here to keep in mind as you're going into and having one of these tough, difficult conversations.
You've already identified the context. Now it's time.
You identified the individual, the context, and the need to have this conversation. You're about to move forward with it. How do you approach it from that point forward? And here's some things to keep in mind. Maybe ask permission to have a difficult conversation. Say, look, this is going on. I'd like to have a tough conversation, difficult conversation, however you want to word it for your organization, and say, is there a time that we can meet? So there's no real guessing game. They're like, hey, I need to talk to you. And it's like, okay, what am I trouble? Am I going to the principal's office? What's this is about? I don't know. And just giving some frame of reference up front really helps set up the conversation for success once you're in the conversation. Yeah. And the next one, and this is kind of goes back to what Jared and I, we talk about connect before you correct. And this where it's a tough conversation, but not an oppositional conversation. If it's someone you have a great rapport with, right, then they're going to be more leaning into listening. They're going to be more leaning into adopting and changing and improving their behaviors, their actions, their goals, and so forth. And you may get more of the picture behind of what's going on than you realized otherwise if you didn't have that rapport established already.
So you're asking, really what is the depth of connection with who I'm speaking to.
Exactly. So that's the question. The second thing to keep in mind is, okay, is this someone I just met? Is this someone I've known for a bit, have somewhat of a good rapport? Or, hey, I've been working with this person for 15 years. I just come out and give a little smack talk and say, knock it off, right?
Yeah.
Those are all different scenarios depending on the depth of that conversation you're having with those people. So, and meet privately. Don't do this somewhere other people eavesdrop or listen in, or don't do it to call someone out in a group setting or a team meeting and say, hey, you're doing this. It's really development you want to respect. You want to respect the individual, and that indicates your value to them that, hey, I respect you. I don't want to do this in front of others. I'm not here to shame you, manipulate you, be passive aggressive in my approach. This is for your growth, your development, because I really care about you.
Yeah. And again, here's another parenting leadership parallel. Correcting children in public, not a good idea. I don't see that ever going in a direction that's helpful for either the parent or the child. And it's the same when we do this with our peers or with people we're leading that are grown adults. It brings a lot of shame and a lot of disrespect to someone's personhood, and people will say, well, what if they really deserve, the kid really needed to be corrected? It's like, do it privately. Remove the child from the situation, speak to them first and correct them. It's the same with adults.
Very much. So the next thing to keep in mind, told you I got a list, be patient here. Assume good motives. When you go into the conversation, you just kind of want to assume there's good motives in what they're doing and why they're doing it. So you want to have a discovery mindset. You're going in to ask, you kind of gather information. Here, you go in and say, I'm assuming positive intent on your part. And again, that shows that respect, that it shows the value to that individual as well.
Yeah. The next one is one of my favorites because it's so simple. Be specific. Be specific. Again, you mentioned, asking for permission, but it goes a little deeper than that when you need to be. We talked about this, I think, in the two-way communication.
We did.
And the one-way. But yes, specific, clear, concise. So there's no or as little possible room for misunderstanding.
Yeah, and that connects to the next one here is explain the impact of what's happening. So, for example, you have an staff member, employee, individual who's showing up late consistently. And you could go in and say, I feel like you don't have as much engagement anymore. You don't really care anymore. What's going on? That's a feeling, and that's general. Specific would be, hey, for the last 5 shifts, you've been 20 minutes late. Are you okay? What's going on? It's starting to have an impact to our performance. We weren't able to meet our quota because of your tardiness. I don't want to undermine what's going on in your life. Please tell me, what can I do to help you as an individual?
A great parallel with this, when I had a buddy years ago, he had bought his wife, I think it was a brand new SUV, a real nice SUV, and she crashed it. And so she was so nervous to call, my buddy, her husband. And my buddy was like, are you okay? Are you okay? And she's like, well, yeah, I'm calling you. I must be fine. And he goes, oh, thank the Lord, good, you're good. That's fine.
Yeah.
And she was like, well, but what about the vehicle? Because I don't care about the car. They make them every day. Like, I only got one of you, right?
Yeah.
And so by asking somebody, even if they've been, tardy or whatever that word is, they've been late for shifts, and addressing the personhood first is what a leader does.
Absolutely. And going back to a parenting example, my daughter, soon after she got her driver's license, back in the car out of the garage, and the side view mirror clipped it and took a chunk out of the plastic framework around the mirror. And she just came in terrified and just scared. And I'm like, are you okay? Yeah, I'm okay. I said, all right, no problem then. She goes, really? I said, yeah, really. That's the most important thing to me is you. We want to put people above all else. Yeah. So be specific, explain the impact, ask their perspectives. Hey, you've been late 20 minutes, the last 5 shifts. What's going on? Are you all right? We want to leverage care and candor, and usually care comes first.
And there might be something you have no idea that was actually going on in that person's life or whatnot that has been leading to this.
My pet just died. I'm heading for a divorce. got to go to the hospital for radiation. We just don't know, right? So you want to ask.
Yeah. And then coming out of asking, and getting that perspective, explaining it back, being specific, you have this whole approach of setting a course of action.
Yeah.
Like in working with the person, perhaps to do this. So you're not coming across as some sort of, domineering tyrant, but you're trying to elevate someone even when they need to be corrected or brought up to to that level again. So what's the course of action? Setting a course of action.
And that course of action could be helping them to show up on time. Maybe, helping, offer to come pick them up, help them out at home, get an Uber for them or whatever it is. But the other part of that may be, all right, for the next 4 weeks, you have my permission to be 30 minutes late. So you can get things back in order and get what's going on under control, right? So again, it's all about the people.
This is so counterintuitive for a lot of people. So please understand. Again, I want to make this disclosure. We did this a couple episodes ago. We're playing the long-term game because a lot of leaders, a lot of business owners and things, they'll be like, I just fire this dude and get someone who's going to show up on time. Why would I put up with that? Why would I go through all of this? Well, that's a business owner. That's a person. That's not a leader. That's a tyrant in my mind.
Yeah.
If you haven't tried these things, and they've all failed, then why would you come down really harsh? If you're concerned about adding value to the people, you want them to buy into. I mean, I could go really deep, but just let the reminder be.
I took over a team from a leader who was just like what Jared is describing. And the entire team loved her. She was checking in on them. Everything okay? How's life? You lost your pet? I'm so sorry. They're just ongoing, constant conversation of her demonstrating this care.
Mm-hmm.
And they had the highest productivity in the organization.
Mm-hmm.
And they also, all of them, to the individual, would say, I would do anything for this person because of the way they've been treating me here. Right. So it is counterintuitive, but the long game is you end up getting better results. It builds momentum and it gets you further down the field as a result.
Yeah. There was a massive loss, and you guys know this. We're speaking the choir of just employee turnover and turnover and turnover. And one of the biggest things that the generation, I think it was just under me, I'm a millennial, kind of the next, so the tail end of millennials and the next generation under, they were just looking for good company culture the whole time.
Yeah.
They would have stayed with a company simply because they had a boss that they adored more than they would stay if you gave them a $4 raise. I mean, it was just, no, I want to feel like part of the team. I want to feel valued.
Yeah.
I want to feel like if I don't show up, things might not go as they could have. I want to feel like I belong here. And that's human nature.
We all want to feel like we belong, don't we? Yeah. Absolutely.
So what's our next one? You got to set a course of that. Communicate their value, which I think we've been
you just want to
one of these.
Yeah, that kind of is an umbrella that just goes over all of this. You want to be constantly, hey, I appreciate you. You got a great personality. You bring great skill set. You accomplished a lot. I see great potential for you. Really appreciate you. We just want to drip value throughout the conversation as we're holding this tough conversation. It again will make it a tough conversation, but maybe not an oppositional conversation.
And that kind of leads to the whole idea of identifying, is this a skill issue or is this a will issue? Like which one is this? I just don't want to be here. That's different than they just struggle with the skill of doing something.
I'm not doing this well. I don't know how to do this well. I'm second guessing myself. Could I get some training on this? That's one thing. But if someone is just like, forget you think parenting example, again, if you think of, parent and child having dinner, sitting down, and the child reached for the milk and they accidentally spill it. So sorry, mommy, clean it up. Not a problem. It's different when you get a teenager, takes the milk, turns it upside down, looking parent square in the eye and say, screw you. Right. So those are two different scenarios is it a will issue or is it a skill issue? So that's what we mean by
And again, too, moving right along here, we're almost done with these approaches, but what kind of person am I speaking to?
Yeah. Is this person teachable? Are they not teachable? Is there a level of emotional intelligence? Where is that at? Is there a sense of humility in this person? And I love the definition that C.S. Lewis, Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, Witch, and the Wardrobe, I love his definition of being humble.
Mhm.
And he says,
Yeah.
humility is not thinking less of yourself. Oh, I'm good for nothing. I'm lousy. Humility is thinking of yourself less. You're putting other people forward first. You're thinking of them and their benefit to them more often.
Right.
That's true, healthy humility.
Yeah. So
So-
what kind of person am I speaking to going into this conversation?
Right.
And again, that think parenting, you know your children. If you've really connected with those you're leading, you'll be able to know this is Susan or this is Eric and this is their personalities.
And it's,
I already kind of intuitively know this is going to be a skill issue.
Yeah.
Or I already intuitively know I just can't get them motivated.
and it's going to be a scale issue. Some people will have similar emotional intelligence. Some will be more different than others. And we're all growing. We're all in process. And our goal as leaders is to help them move forward in that journey. So yeah, what kind of person am I speaking to?
Exactly. And again, care and candor, which we'll beat into the ground with this podcast because it's just so important. But let's recap this whole list of approaches here and I'll just give you 3 statements and we'll kind of go over them. Minimizes the chance of burning the bridge. This is what we want to do. This is why Bill and I tend to ask these questions. We tend to use these filters because we want to minimize the chance of burning a bridge. And that's really, really important. I think of those funny, obviously staged videos on Instagram or YouTube where you've got a guy, he's trying to flirt with a girl and get a date with her. And she's sort of like, I'm not even interested in you. And then he walks away and he opens the door to his Ferrari to get in. And all of a sudden it's like, oh, and she comes running back over. It's made to be comical, but you already burned that bridge. So that's a good analogy. I like that. Don't burn the bridge. And then you've got remembering the goal of adding value. And we talked about this, so we won't talk too much on it. But again, the goal at the end of every day for a great leader is to add value to his followers or to someone during the day. That's the difference. And that's why we filter with these approaches. And then lastly, Bill, is remembering teachability and courage.
Yeah. 2 most important characteristics of a great leader is being teachable.
Yeah.
In those tough conversations, did something come up that really hits home of an opportunity for you to grow as a leader? Did we drop the ball? I could have done this better back there as a leader. I need to learn from that.
And that's humility from
our perspective, right? So we need to remain teachable. And we may get into an oppositional conversation and it's a lot of junk coming at us.
Come on. Yeah.
But there's a nugget of truth in there that, hey, we would be remiss if we didn't take that and learn, as hard as it is, as hard as our pride in that difficult conversation can make it, is taking with that, that's truth.
Yeah.
I need to do better at that.
Yeah.
Own it and run with it. So that's teachability. And then courage. It takes courage to be a leader. Leadership is about sacrifice. Leadership is about others first. Leadership is going where no one else is going. That's the whole aspect of being a leader. If everybody was going there, nobody would be the leader.
Yeah.
So to be a leader, we need to have courage to step forward and go into these conversations prepared, right? With a plan, right? Hopefully we've given you some skills that when you've walked away from today's episode, you feel like you've had value added.
Exactly.
Right. And that's our intent, is to add value to you. I mentioned Jared and I are not in this to make it a profit, but hey, I wouldn't say no to when we get to monetize, because that means we can get more tools. We got new mics coming. We know we've had some sound issues. We know we've had some videos issues. If you're watching on YouTube, we're learning with every episode how to do better a little bit at a time. So our goal is not to make ourselves rich. We're not looking to, buy mansions or any of that.
To help people.
We're here to help people, period. And if we don't ever get monetized, but we have an audience who are feeling value added, we're going to keep doing this. Yeah. We will. So
let me give you I want to give you 4 filter questions. Okay. We went through the approach filters. I just want to give you 4 questions to ask when approaching these difficult conversations. And then Bill's going to remind us of 3 really good skills. And then we'll wrap this episode up. So here's some filter questions. Okay. Should the conversation include one or more of these following elements? Again, you're entering into what's going to be a difficult conversation. Should this conversation include one or more of these 4 things? Number 1, is this going to be a series of conversations or a one and done? because a lot of times we'll come into what should be 3 or 4 meetings with somebody and we're trying to do it in 15, 20 minutes. Not going to work. So identifying, is this a half an hour meeting? We should be good to go. Or is this going to be, hey, let's meet the next couple of days and kind of flesh some things out.
Yeah. And there may be a series of things that this individual needs to work out. And you're going to work on the biggest one first, have that conversation. Once that's move into another. So like as Jared said, is it one and done or is it going to be a series?
The next one, number 2, saying that this conversation may need to include is all parties present. Sometimes it's not just you and one other person, it's other people are involved in this. You're going to try to rewind the tape, back up the train, get some context from multiple.
Jared and I recently learned it's kind of hard to address an issue with one person, having someone else involved and not having their ear in the room, because the conversation goes into they said, he said, she said. But if you have them in the room and walk through it together with rules and guidance of who speaks when and giving turns and clarity and all that, it makes a big difference. So who are all the parties present?
And the third question to ask is should a third party be present? Again, if this is a two-way conversation, you're thinking to yourself, this could turn into a liability. This could turn into a lawsuit. This could be, my words could be used against me. If you're going into a conversation with a very confrontational person or persons, do you need someone who's third party, non-biased, can just record the conversation in their mind or what have you? So sometimes a third party is really necessary. I work with students and families and, work with, kind of a counseling, spiritual guidance type stuff. And so a lot of times I want one more person in there, just so, words can't be brought back. You said this. Well, actually I did not. Yeah. So,
and, this is sad that we have to mention this, but it's a reality of life.
It is.
What if you have someone who has a history of being abused, right? You want someone else there for them so they feel safe. You want to create an environment where both parties feel safe and willing to have that conversation with you.
Yeah, it's kind of being above reproach, I think
that's a very good term. Yeah, absolutely.
Kind of being above reproach. And then the fourth question I would ask is, who are the stakeholders? I'll let Bill explain that.
Yeah. So if you've got a tough conversation about a policy, procedure, value within the organization or structure, who all is being impacted by that policy, procedure, or value, right? Do they need to be part of that conversation? Are they being affected by it? Could they potentially be affected by it? Then they are the stakeholders, right? They could be impacted by it. That's who, the definition of being a stakeholder. Do they need to be part of this conversation, either at first in the initial conversation, or as we said, this may be a process of series of conversations. So that's what we mean by that, stakeholders.
Good deal. So Bill, wrap this up. Give us some reminders, 3 skills for this whole idea of two-way communication when it gets tough.
Yeah. So going back to our previous episode, we talked about conversations two-way, right? So, and we had some basic skills there that could be practiced. Ask questions, right?
Absolutely.
Ask questions more than you give information or make statements. That way you're showing a demonstration of wanting to them feel heard and understood. That gives them value. The second is reiteration. And again, so let me repeat back what you said. You said X, Y, Z. Is that correct? Do you feel I have a good understanding? Right? Just again, make sure they feel heard and understood to move the conversation forward.
You heard and understood.
Yeah. And make sure you understand accurately. That's right. And if I misunderstand, I make an assumption. I'm another 15 minutes into the conversation on that assumption, and I'm going the wrong way completely. And they don't have the courage to speak up and correct me. Yeah. So reiteration is a really good skill to have in these conversations. And finally, transparency. I mean, just be transparent of yourself. If they mention something that hits home with you, that you struggled with, or you have a relatable story or know somebody who was, just tell that, let them know. Let them know that you're a human being too. We're both doing the best we can to move and grow and develop in the roles we have, right? And you want them to know that you're human just like they are, and you want to learn and grow along with them.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, I mean, looking at tough conversations, you want to check your context, you want to check your approach, and you want to filter. Ask some good questions to identify what's really going on. And Bill, you had a quote here. We have a quote.
We have, yeah. Just be a resource for others in their development and growth.
Yep.
Right. And going into this conversation, you're making yourself available to help them grow. Be that resource and be willing to sacrifice to help them develop. For you yourself to be that resource takes time, takes energy, emotional energy and effort,
Yes.
right? Maybe lack of sleep, maybe effort in preparing for the conversation. But that's what great leaders do. They look out for others. We got their back.
And adding value to people, even with tough conversations, is a long term.
It is indeed.
So, hey, drop us a comment. We'd love to connect with you. And thanks so much for joining us on Value Added Podcast. And hopefully we'll see you next time.
Take care. Thank you.